So all those experiments were pushed aside in order to focus on one thing. They did that one thing extraordinarily well, well enough to survive. But they paid a price. And let's look at that price in some detail. First, by repressing the independence and freedom of women, they kept alive the old family structure in the household. The dominance of the male, the subordination of women and children, and that kind of inequality ate at the socialist principles they talked about but did not institute in the home. Ditto in the workplace. They left that a place of hierarchy. Government officials replaced the private boards of directors, the private capitalists, but it was still a handful of officials sent from Moscow, members of the Communist Party, who told everybody what to do, where to work, how to work, what to do with the results of their work, how to use whatever profits their enterprise produced. It was still that old capitalist style of internal organization of the enterprise. And that created tensions between the government officials running it and the workers doing the work, kind of like you have in capitalism, the endless struggle and tensions between those who run the show and those who do the work, the minority at the top and the majority at the bottom. This was not only the inability of the Russian socialist experiment to go beyond rebuilding a country and becoming a beacon for economic growth for the mass majority of poor people in the world. It was something that ate at the viability of the Soviet Union itself. Let me add a couple more. The Soviet Union in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s was also committed in a remarkable way to holding on to the industrialization as the focus. As the World War II ended and they entered the Cold War with the United States, they were caught up in an arms race. Remember, the Second World War ended with the United States dropping 2 atomic bombs in Japan, the only country ever to do that, to drop nuclear weapons. But it was a message not to the Japanese, who were already beaten, but to the Russians as to what the Americans were prepared to do. And as the Russians became the new enemy after Japan was defeated, they felt they had to, and therefore built a nuclear industry, a nuclear weapons manufacturing capability. So they had to keep on with their focus on industrialization and postponing the development of the consumer. So that became their weak point. The mass of Russian people noticed, with modern radio and television communications, that their standard of living was repressed relative to what was normal in the West. They were jealous, they were envious, they wanted to live at that standard too, and the West used that for all the obvious benefits. Yes, we had become a rich country, not a poor one, but our standard of living didn't show it. And then, and also to defeat the United States, or at least to prevent themselves from being surrounded, I should mention after World War II that the United States military did surround Russia with military bases at every country around it. The anxiety of the Russians meant that they tried to do a little bit like that too, such as invading Afghanistan in order to make that less of a threat to them, to have some room, like they did in Eastern Europe, between their border and where the enemy might come from yet again. And all of that took resources. The resources to have a nuclear military, the resources to invade other countries and manage them at a distance, etc. And it turned out the Russians couldn't do all they set out to do. They couldn't create a consumer industry big enough. They couldn't create an economy rich enough to support an arms race with the richest country on earth. They couldn't do it. But they kept trying, and as they tried, and people's anger, add to that the absence of civil liberties, the absence of civil rights, looking to the West as a place where these things they could not have in Russia were had. They became critical of the Communist Party as a party that wasn't doing enough, and the party became very defensive. Yes, it had produced the miracle of economic power and growth, but they had paid that big price. And eventually, between inability to do it all and the bitterness built up, the Russian Revolution of 1917 came apart and crashed in on itself in 1989.